Welcome to the Present Fathers Podcast. This is the show that focuses on climbing the mountain of fatherhood together. Our mission is to help fathers be present by sharing valuable ideas and concepts that will equip men to be the best father possible. Being a good father is hard work, but it is so vitally important. We believe that dads matter, and that's why this podcast is for you. So gear up, dads, and get ready. It's time to start climbing.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Present Fathers Podcast. On tonight's episode, we will be talking about leadership, and we have a very special guest with us today, John Michael Clark. We are very excited for him to be a part of our podcast today. He actually runs his own podcast, which we'll let him introduce himself and get into, but really excited for tonight. It's going to be a great episode. I think as fathers, the role of leadership is extremely important to what we do, both in our marriage and as a father. So I'm really looking forward to our discussion tonight, gentlemen. And yeah, John Michael, why don't you go ahead and just introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your program, and then also being the pastor of your church, and we'll kind of just take it from there.
What's up, brothers? Glad to be with you guys tonight. So I am John Michael Clark. I go by JM or John Michael. I like to keep it complicated like that. But been married to Natalie, my dream girl, for 15 years. We have 3 boys. We're raising them out here in Virginia on the Chesapeake Bay. We love and follow King Jesus. I'm the pastor to Salt Church. And what I'm doing, like you just referenced, I coach through a company called the Family Captain coaching practice that I started, where I help Christ-following husbands in family leadership and sex and marriage, 2 things that I don't think we've gotten right a lot of times, but the church should be thriving in. So we prioritize it. We make it really practical so that guys can level up, so that men can thrive, so that women can thrive, so that children can thrive, so that God can get glory, so that kids can be blessed, and so men can feel like truly the men that they were called to be. So I love that work. It's my passion, part of my life's calling, and it's what brought us together here tonight.
Awesome. Well, we are definitely blessed to have you on, and appreciate you being very flexible on kind of a last minute scheduling today. So yeah, just really excited for this. Brandon, Dustin, you guys want to give us any updates since last we met a whopping like 4 days ago?
Yeah, man, just been staying busy with work. Getting ready for Turkey Day, ready to see my team whoop on my brother's team, and very excited about that. So, the Egg Bowl. Yeah, so that's about all I got going. Just get ready for that.
Awesome. Dustin?
I've been in training for Thanksgiving for the past week. I'm stretching my stomach out to accommodate the massive amount of food that I'm going to take in.
Excellent.
So that's been my primary area of focus this week.
Nice. Very good. Yeah, we're hosting at our place, so we were scrambling and cleaning and getting everything. I prepped the turkey. It's all ready to go. I'll pop it in the morning. So yeah, very nice. Looking forward to it. Obviously, Thanksgiving is it's a great time about the food and everything, but it's also a great time to kind of reflect on, all the blessings we have, especially here in America. So yeah, looking forward to it, and it's always a good time with family. All right. With that, let's hop into the book. I'm really excited about this. Leadership is something, it's been a big part of my life. So I'm kind of itching to get into the book, and just a little bit of context for everyone who may not have read it. It's about Shackleton's expedition, which set out in 1914 to Antarctica. And they endeavored to be the first team to cross to the South Pole on land across the entire continent, which had never been done up to that point. Long story short, though, they get stuck in the ice on their ship. They literally live on their ship for 12 months, in the ice floes, and then eventually they get so intense it starts destroying the ship, so they have to abandon ship. And they basically spend, I think, upwards of 6 to 7 months surviving on the ice in Antarctica with virtually no supplies. They're having to hunt for food. And through that time, the book really highlights how different members of the crew, the captain as well as kind of some of the lieutenants and subordinate leadership, they don't really panic. They don't lose their heads. And when, especially in times where the subordinates had to kind of rise to the occasion, they seized the opportunity and they did rise to the occasion. And through that experience, ultimately all of them survived. I'm really high notes here on there's a lot goes on, but extremely challenging situation. As I was reading the book, you kept thinking, oh, this has got to be the hardest point for them. And then it gets harder, and then it gets worse and worse and worse, and just on, and just one thing after the other. But really, really great topic, or at least a foundation to use as examples of leadership. And John Michael, we're really excited to compare and contrast that with leadership in kind of a military expeditionary sense, and then how we can apply those principles with the work you do with husbands in our own lives and as fathers, and just have a discussion on that. So with that, I'll kick it over to you, John Michael, because it's actually you who suggested Brandon read this book, and then through Brandon, we have now all read it. So I'd love for your initial thoughts on it and kind of what struck you initially, and then maybe some parallels that you can share with us from what you do today with what you learned through the book.
Yeah, well, I'll just reemphasize what you just said. George gave it, like, to say that they went through some difficult times is like the understatement of the millennium. So he's right. It gets worse, and you're like, wow, this is the pinnacle of misery. And then somehow it's ridiculous. It's unbelievable how bad it keeps getting. And you're like, surely this is the end. Surely, like, these guys live. That's the spoiler. Everybody lives, which is amazing. But yeah, I was so inspired in reading the book. And through this process of reading the book, I saw Shackleton's mastery. And I saw, of course, the men talked about him this way. They called him the greatest leader God ever put on earth. That's a paraphrase of how they said it. But they had such immense respect for the man. And you can tell they all understood what they went through. They all understood the absurdity of it all. And at the same time, we see Shackleton leading his men with what I teach are the 3 legs of leadership. We see compassion, we see responsibility, and we see the authority. But such a masterful wisdom in all that he's doing and the ways that he's doing it. So he obviously, this was not his first rodeo. He didn't just get thrown into a difficult situation and think, I would thrive in that. Well, Shackleton had been thriving for a long time. There were a lot of things he had been doing right. So he was already the appropriate man for the job when he reached this most difficult moment, which is what enabled them to thrive. But so many little lessons, on every page, where you're just paying attention and noticing, ooh, you could have gone this direction, you could have gone that direction. But Shackleton wisely navigates the middle of the road there with lots of personalities. Anybody that's been around, in all male culture, whether it's a football team or a military unit or anything else, like, there's a lot of egos there, and that can be valuable. That can be a blessing, where we're accomplishing things, we're challenging one another and competing. And at the same time, the stakes are very high in some of those scenarios. So masterful job of leadership. And I whenever I read a book, I try and approach it, whatever filter the author intended, I almost try and dismiss. And I approach almost everything I read, because of what I do and because of what my passions are. I put a lens on the front of the book and say, this is about family leadership. And that's how I approach it. So I'm able to extract a lot of things from a lot of strange places because of that.
I like that. That's an interesting way to kind of, take even a book that's not necessarily educational and make it a experience that you can benefit from, professionally or otherwise. Brandon and Dustin, let's kick it around to you guys. Initial thoughts on the book, and just on what really stuck out. Maybe the top 2 or 3 things that really stuck out to you reading through it.
Yeah, I think for me personally, I thought the book was just absolutely incredible, and like you guys had said before, each new chapter had me almost not believing what I was reading. And the way that Lansing tells the story makes you almost feel like the actual cold temperatures the crew felt, like it was like in the crushing of the ship and the eerie sounds that sounded like something dying slowly, and how it was just pressing on the mental capacity of the men. I just thought that was such a profound thing, because these guys are in negative degree weather by themselves with nobody coming to help them. Like, it's just them. They have to rely on each other. It's Ernest and 27 other men. And so for me, that was just such a daunting thing to think about. Like, if you were there and nobody was coming to save you, that's a pretty crazy thing. It's like, what have you done to train for something like this. I honestly just felt myself talking about the story for days after I finished reading the book. There's so much. I think the biggest key point though I saw was I was struck by like the general positive outlook that was conveyed by the crew throughout the entire ordeal. I think just how Lansing described that most of the men found solace in the seemingly like monotonous day-to-day life, even when their survival chances were bleak. I think that was just kind of, that outlook was one of the most important things that was happening for them. And I think Ernest was one of the genius level people that made sure that that was one of the few things that stayed intact through the situation. So that's kind of what I picked up on it.
Yeah, I think men in particular, we need challenge and we need struggle. As I was reading it and hearing their attitudes, it reminded me of stories of World War II, where British people, after a few months of being bombed by the Germans, just went about their day and looked up and said, "Oh, there goes another bomb," and they went to the store and they did what they did. Our ability to adapt and handle situations that don't seem like it'd be possible, that's what we're built for. And no man is an island. I don't think these guys could have done it by themselves. If it had just been one or two of them and they didn't have a system, they would not have lasted very long. But they had everything they needed to succeed in that environment. And seeing leadership succeed in an environment that extreme is so heartening when we look at other challenges we have with leadership. And we realize that those challenges are really good for us. I know for me, I do have a child, so that's a challenge, obviously, but my life is in many ways very comfortable. And I think that is often to my detriment. I think, some physical, emotional, mental struggles, not on the extreme level of, freezing every day for a year, but I think those challenges really help us grow as men. And they're really good for us. So reading that, and I guess in some ways, living vicariously through Shackleton and seeing the challenges he went through, gave me some of that and inspired me to say, okay, if he can handle this, I can get through my little bit of cold in the operating room today. I'm a little cold. I'll be all right. I'll be warm in 2 hours. It'll be okay.
Yeah.
So that
says
helps
the man
me.
who lives in Florida.
Yeah.
70 degrees is cold to you, right? So.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Yeah, I actually took a bunch of notes on, what really stuck out to me from leadership, but I don't want to just run through them all or whatever. But I think one of the things that was really highlighted very well in the book, probably the top takeaway for me, because people talk about leadership all the time. I know people are real into Jocko Willink and other guys who focus on extreme ownership and all these concepts, which to me is kind of just, that's been beaten into me heavily. But the thing that really isn't talked about a lot is interpersonal tact and emotional intelligence. And you guys talked about how happy the crew stayed. Well, there's actually, if I remember, 2 or 3 crew members who were essentially either willing to just call it quits and give up, or they were just extremely toxic, right? Always negative. And so what stuck out to me about Shackleton the most is realizing that, a negative person, misery loves company, right? And that mentality can just spread like a cancer. And what he did was very, very smart tactically to ensure that those who were still kind of in a good rhythm and although they were struggling, they hadn't despaired yet. And so with some of these different people who were problematic, he shifted his method of engaging with them. Some guys he had to yell at or whatever, but not yell, but like be very direct and, kind of be on them. Other guys needed kind of you have to tell them how great they are and kind of play to their ego and things like that. So those to me really stuck out as probably one of the most underrated facets of leadership, because wherever you go, especially if you're leading a team, a large team, you're going to have a wide range of personalities and people from different backgrounds. And so you have to be able to be perceptive to those different individuals, what makes them tick, what makes them excited, or what are their struggles, those kinds of things. And then, if some people are just truly very difficult and there's not really a whole lot you can do to change that. So you have to kind of insulate them away from the group and essentially mitigate against them. Other people you can kind of draw out, better qualities from, and they just need a little teaching or coaxing. But I think the book really highlighted very well how Shackleton quickly identified those individuals who he either needed kind of the coaxing or insulation, and just masterfully did that. And so essentially one of them was super difficult, super toxic. He basically put him in his own tent. So he said, I'm the leader. I'll endure this, toxic person and listen to his griping, but I won't let it, poison my men. And to me, that was just one of the most immense decisions that he made that ultimately led to their survival. Because if you let that fester, it just spreads. And I've seen it in the military, right? Where, one negative person converts a whole platoon to just being down and the end of the world and everything, right? So I think the reason they collectively kept a good mentality is because of his emotional intelligence about his crew and understanding how to adapt that. And I think that highlights a great example for as a parent, right? Especially if you have multiple kids. All your kids are different. Your spouse is different. Your friends are different. You've got to work and adapt yourself to kind of meet the situation. So that stuck out to me. I'll pause. I know I'm rambling. John Michael, I'd actually love to kind of segue from that into, some other parallels you had between Shackleton's leadership and maybe what we can draw into fatherhood.
Well, you guys are going to help me because it's been a long time since I've read it. So as y'all keep talking, I'm going, that's right. But what you forgot to mention is Shackleton, I think, had all the guys take a love language quiz before they went on their journey, and he had them all take the Enneagram. So he knew that's how he had such insight into everybody's situation. No, you're right, though. That's the thing that impressed me the most as well, is the fact that this guy's paying attention. He's watching, he's learning people, and he's focused on accomplishing the mission, which became the survival of his men. Like the original mission, it became obvious early on that, all right, that ain't happening. But after a while, it was really obvious, okay, we've got to survive. And I think, there's some advantage to a leader in a moment like that, even though the pressure is immense. It is going to bring a perfect clarity. It's not an excuse, but it's certainly easy for us. We've got plenty of distractions because we have plenty of comfort. When you remove those things, it makes you have a healthy tunnel vision for what matters most. So I think we see that, but the way Shackleton rolls with it, forsakes his own ego, forsakes his own comfort, really because he loves his men. It's an incredible thing. When I talk to clients about this stuff, when we're navigating, I'll have multiple guys and we're coaching through different scenarios. I say, hey, for you, and we work through something. I said, now, Zach, I would never tell you that because here's why that's different. And here's what I'm considering. And here's the context. Jeff, though, this is absolutely how you should proceed and move forward. So it's important to understand what you've got, understand your moment, understand your season, understand your mission. And that's true for fathers. Everybody's in a different season. You need to know the season of your household. You need to understand the times that you live in the world, but you need to understand the season of your household. Well, your bros might be in a different season. Maybe they've got older kids. Maybe this current season is going to be daddy's got to finish this school. Maybe this current season is, it's a season of sweetness and margin. Maybe this season, it doesn't matter what it is. The fact is you're the captain of the ship. It's your responsibility to identify it. And then once you can identify it, you can determine what the mission is. Now what you've determined what the mission is, now we can be deliberate so we don't drift through this thing. Sometimes the ice floes get a hold of you. That sucks. But otherwise, we want to be picking a destination, but we got to do that with knowledge, not just with, a dartboard.
Oh, I'm so guilty of that. I have a 2-year-old right now, so I don't have a lot of free time. And I look at my friends with older kids and I go, oh, they've got all this free time. It must be something wrong with the way I'm parenting or my relationship isn't fair. That makes so much sense. That really resonates with me. My season right now is that my time is about my young child because, he's going to take up more time than an older child. And so reminding myself that is really going to be key and saying that's okay that I don't have the free time to, goof off like I used to in my 20s. That was a different season. So, wow, that's really powerful. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, man. And the cool thing, Dustin, is once you start to think on that more, as you meditate on that in the coming days and take it to the Lord in prayer, maybe write about it a little bit, discuss it with your wife, it's going to give you even a joy in it rather than, we'll get through this season. I don't mean that. I don't mean like, when they're out of diapers or, when this. I mean like,
Sure.
Like this can be dope. And this should be dope. No matter what season we're in, we're going to make it dope. And you're going to start to get excited about the ways you can maximize this moment rather than feeling jealous or bummed that we're here. It's going, own it. This is where we are, and that's not a bad thing. The Lord's got us here. Now, how can we crush? How can we dominate? How can we make sure when the season is finished, we said, praise God, we did that faithfully. Not perfectly, but faithfully.
Yeah,
Love
that's
that.
good. Hey,
And I
just
think-
cut in real quick, Brandon. Justin did point out that Shackleton, interviewed each member of his expedition before they actually formed the expedition. So from the get-go, he was trying to pay attention to different people's personalities.
Sure.
Well, and he found people whose love language is being freezing at all times. So he had a huge advantage there. I mean, they were good to go.
High on physical touch. They need to snuggle to stay warm. Everything else would be important.
I think
That's right,
I think I certainly would have died through that experience. I hate the cold.
Yeah, but going through the seasons, I think something that really resonated for me when I started really truly trying to become the best version of myself I could be as a husband or as a dad was accepting the consuming sense of responsibility in whatever season I was in. Having to accept that and know that the Lord has trusted me with these children and with this woman, and that mediocrity was just not acceptable. I've said it plenty of times before, and I'll say it again. And comfort is where your dreams and your ambitions and your motivations go to die. And I got comfortable. I said, well, I've been with her for X amount of years. It's like, I don't need to keep dating, or I don't need to keep doing this. It's like, no, absolutely. You have to. It's a constant thing. And, it's the same thing with your children. You have to constantly be intentional, and that intentionality might have to change, and it might have to adapt because your kids will grow and their personalities will change, and situations in your life will change. So yeah, I love that. I think that that sense of responsibility and that season and that acceptance of it, like you said, can turn to pure joy. And that's where I'm at. Like, I feel like I'm in the good old days. Like, I'll look back and say that was the prime of my life, and so I'm catching myself moment to moment, just seeing how my kids are smiling and seeing how my wife is just enjoying everything that I've worked hard for. Like, on our most recent trip, I planned everything. I said, honey, just trust me. I've got this. I'm going to navigate everything from Nashville to DC, back to Nashville. We're going to fit as much as we can in. And man, we had a blast. And she was so thankful. And I just got to watch her enjoy my children and our life and the fruits of our labor. So yeah, I'm in agreement, man. The seasons are, I love adapting and changing to them, but I love that there is a different season for every dad, for sure.
It always requires something new. Every few years, not even, I guess probably every year, each of my sons is in a different stage. And I realize, man, like this dude needs a better dad. and I'm determined to be that guy. So let me grow, because these boys are growing. My oldest, he's 14 now. He needs a better dad. And so there have been seasons and moments where I recognize you better keep being that dude. You got to stay in front of these boys. I want them to far surpass their father in every way. And at the same time, it's a challenge to stay in front of them to make sure I'm actually leading them well. But like you said, that burden of responsibility for me, Brandon, I tell people I didn't become a man until I was 28 years old, 27, 28, because that's whenever it finally clicked, the responsibility piece for me. So I'm 38 now. So I've only been a man for 10 years, but that was, at first it was overwhelming because I got it and it was, oh no. But in the very next moment, the Lord opened my eyes to see that's good news, because if I'm responsible for it all, then that means I can create the outcomes that I want. I'm not a victim anymore of the circumstance or my wife or my children or anything else. It's, you're responsible. Okay, but that means I also have authority. I have the authority to do what's best, and I'm going to do it. So here we go. And that's when things got fun.
Yeah, so I can really relate to that. I would say I was about 28 when I really truly became a man, right? And let the selfishness and things like that really start going away, and taking seriously my role as a husband and father a lot more than I did. I think a lot of people, it's the complacency, right? So you never really get to that point. But you kind of also touched on something like, oh man, they need a better dad. I think that's something that virtually every single father feels, because your kids are constantly growing and changing. And so it's not like you figure out the current stage and then you got to learn a whole new one. And just even recently, Brandon and Dustin, some of the books you've read, like Dr. Meg Meeker's book, Strong Fathers, Strong Daughters, and Hero, where I was reading it, it was like super convicting, like, oh man, I got to improve. Like I feel like I'm doing pretty good, and then I feel like I'm the worst father in the world reading some of that book, and I'm like, oh man, I gotta, So I think that's maybe just a point of encouragement for dads out there. Is I think it's making the intentional effort to just be a little bit better, a little bit at a time, because it's not like an overnight shift, right? You're not going to just magically change who you are in a day or reading one book, but making the constant effort is what's going to reap. Or, you're planting the seeds that are going to really grow, 10, 15, 20 years from now, maybe longer. Right. And so don't be disheartened by the fact that maybe you don't know what you're doing, or maybe you're kind of just taking your best guess. But, that actually ties into a point that it's kind of a military thing, but it really tied into what Shackleton was doing. And it's kind of just making, we call it make a necessary movement in the Army. But, as a dad, some action in what you think is the right direction is better than no action waiting for the perfect solution. And so that's kind of the concept of make a necessary movement. It's one of the troop leading procedures, but Shackleton did that the whole time, kept them prepping for the next thing. So if they had the opportunity to escape, they could on a moment's notice. If he wouldn't have been doing that, they would have been trapped forever. You've got to do the same thing in your family, taking those steps. Maybe you don't really know, but you're just trying to figure it out. Some improvement is better than none at all, waiting for perfection somehow. So I think that's a good kind of parallel between leadership in the general sense and how you apply it to life as a father.
So dads, what's our definition of what a man is? I don't know if I have a great definition. Obviously you're over 18, but to you, you mentioned there's a specific moment in time, John Michael, where you said, I feel like I became a man. Do you have a story of exactly how that happened, or how you would define yourself now at 38 versus you at 25, and why you're a man now and you weren't then?
Oh man. Yeah, 38-year-old me versus 25-year-old me. Put all your money on 38-year-old me.
That's right. I'm ready.
Like bet on me. I will murder that guy. I can take his wife. I can take his family. Kid does not have a chance. He's an idiot. But yeah, so for me, the biggest piece that was missing was responsibility. Like I had said earlier, I define leadership as compassion, responsibility, and authority. It's this three-legged thing. Or there we go. We got our little propeller back there. We got the three blades. So for me, the biggest piece that was still missing was the responsibility. But responsible for what? To your question about what is a man, I define a man, my understanding from scripture is that a man is the protector. He is the provider. He is the leader. And then, of course, those can be zoomed in on, and we can go really far. Protector, yes, bad guys, but way beyond, to protect from the lies of the serpent and everything that goes beyond that. The provider, yes, the financial, like it's easy to check the highest level, but to begin to zoom in, how else am I providing for my family's success and for their blessing and for their growth? And then the leader, that's the one that I think requires the most growth, because a lot of men feel like I protect, I provide. Job well done. Well, that leadership aspect is the final piece for me, where once I took responsibility, I began leading. I began to relieve my wife and saying, hey, babe, you don't have to be husband anymore. I'm going to actually step up and do that. And so now she got to be a wife. She got to rest in the feminine because there was a man around here. Yeah. So those are the biggest pieces for me. It was understanding, protect, provide, and lead. But what the heck does lead mean? Well, lead, another subcategory now, is be compassionate, but take responsibility and use your authority to do its best. That's how it came together for me. And it was like you said, Dustin, it wasn't in one moment. This was a step-by-step process. I was frustrated. And I was a pastor. I was in full-time ministry. People were like, my life wasn't a mess, from the outside looking in. There wasn't like, oh man, this guy needs to get it together. You wouldn't have seen anything. You wouldn't have known. Man, that was a great sermon, Pastor John Michael. Man, he was at the hospital. He's leading Bible studies, like you name it, like everything looks good. But my frustrations were showing up in our household. Again, we were happily married. We were good, better than any marriage I knew of, which is freaking scary. But we were super solid, but I still knew like, we're not there. I didn't know what it was. I couldn't put my finger on it, but we're not there. And I started to build frustration. And for me, it revolved around headship and submission. It revolved around sex and marriage. The frequency wasn't there that I wanted. The freedom wasn't there that I wanted. And eventually the Lord said to me, "Hey, big boy, you can have everything you want." And I was like, "Yes, sir. Sign me up for that." And he said, "You're just going to have to transform as a man to have it." And I went, and I was all in. That wasn't a slap in the face to me. I wasn't like, "Oh, never mind." I was like, "I know I'm ready, Lord. Walk me through this." So that was, a long journey. I took the long way around of I went everywhere, man. It was a book here, a million books, a million podcasts. I felt like I was sifting through so many septic tanks to find like the tiniest jewel. And of course, I'm filtering everything through the word. But as I'm getting this thing all coming together, I'm going, duh, that's right there in the word. Duh, there it was in the word. Wow, it's from the word. And all the pieces started to come together, and to the point where I started to say, wow, thank you, Lord. And the fruit started to show up. And of course, that was what led to everything that I'm doing now. I got the log out of my own eye. And then I said, man, I can help my brothers with the same thing.
That's awesome.
Perfect. And something that you had mentioned, you allowed, through your leadership, your wife was allowed to be feminine. So the society's definition of femininity or feminism is completely different than what the word says. Can you kind of go into that a little bit more, of like how your leadership allowed her to do that and like what that entails?
Right. So I don't want to do what Christian evangelicalism fails at all the time and never calls out the sins of women. I don't intend to do that. But with the work that I do, we focus exclusively on the man. Not to say it's all your fault, but to say, hey, bro, we can't do anything about that. So let's build influence. Let's build leadership capital. Let's transform into the greatest man she's ever known. Well, she should do X, Y, Z. Yes, she should, and she'll answer to God for it. Now, anyway, back to what we can control. Well, yeah, but I know, and I'm with you, and I would rebuke her if I was her pastor, but I'm not. So anyway, back to what we can control. So, yeah, and I know you already know that, Brandon, but just for everybody listening. So I lost the question in my rant. Give it to me again.
Sure. So I was just saying
femininity.
Yes.
Okay, there we go. Femininity. Sorry. So I think of femininity as softness, a vulnerability, a joyful and willful submission, where she actually rests and responds. She fulfills her role as a wife to her husband, a helper. He's called to this mission. She's called to this mission alongside him. But again, we'll just quote the Bible here. He was not made for her. She was made for him. A husband is the head of his wife. Christ is the head of a husband. So a lot of women don't get to enjoy that because we've sold them the burden of responsibility. Hey, baby, with you and me, it's 50-50. Ah, what a clever play there, John Michael. I see what you did. You wanted to get out of responsibility, so you put it on Natalie's back, but you did it while bragging about her. Natalie, you're so great. You're so amazing. You're so awesome. Let me put half of all of our burdens on you, instead of recognizing the obvious truths that I was built for more. My shoulders are supposed to be able to carry more. The physical creation images the spiritual. It's not an accident. It's not a separate, disconnected thing. The physical is intended and deliberately built by God to image the spiritual. So my wife is incredible. Like, you can say all the things. Natalie checks all those boxes. She's wise. She's smart. She's godly. She's beautiful. She's wonderful. That's an incredible woman. I would think you would want her in your corner. Oh, heck yeah, I do. She's my most trusted advisor. I love her more than anybody. I like her more than anybody. I trust her more than anybody. I respect her more than anybody. She's my favorite of all the people. And yet she's not my leader, and she's not my husband. So the feminine is unknown to a lot of women, because on top of the burdens of culture that's told her to be tough and be strong and be hard and stand up and whatever other nonsense. At the same time, the church has padded that with 50-50, be great partners. And then at the same time, I've made the mistake of masculinizing my wife. I've tried to drive her away from her feelings and drive her into logical thinking. Babe, just be clear. What do you want? And I have tried to treat her like a roommate. I've worked to make her more masculine. I've deliberately worked for years to masculinize her, to get her to kill and crush the flower of the feminine spirit and go, hey, be a lighthouse. That's your job, bro. And you didn't want to marry a dude. That's why you married this beautiful woman. Well, she's just changed over the years. Right, John Michael. But you've had a heavy influence on that. So I know I started to answer it, and then I started jumping into some examples.
Perfect.
The feminine in God's good design, she is a she is a flower. But she is not. She's not delicate in the sense that she can be easily broken, but she is tender in the sense that she is to be protected. So Natalie is capable. Natalie is wise. Natalie is godly, and this is true for any godly wife. And at the same time, that doesn't mean she's a husband. It doesn't mean we're swappable humans. Yeah, we're just people raising kids. No, we're a husband and wife raising kids, and I want my wife to enjoy feminine softness. I want her to enjoy the feminine act of surrender, again, which connects to the physical, the sex act. This woman literally lays on her back, opens her knees and her soft body to the hard masculine. These things are not accidental, and they're not like, that's funny. It's not it at all. That's all designed by the Lord to show what else is supposed to be happening in a marriage.
It's really good, man.
Love it.
Thanks for sharing those points. It's really, it's obviously well said, but it also really connects the dots, I think, probably for a lot of people. I've never heard it so quickly, from you kind of captured the whole block, very quickly. It was a really good segment right there. And I think that I agree wholeheartedly in kind of the differences in that men and women are different, and you can't just swap places. And I would argue so far to say that the bulk of our problems as a society are based off the fact that, for 40 years now, American culture has tried to swap men and women intermittently. And here you go. Now we've got today. So thanks for that. Segment
Michael
there.
Foster and Non-Tenant, they are the guys over at It's Good to Be a Man. They say it so well. As a man goes, so goes the household. As the household goes, so goes the church. As the church goes, so goes society. And then I add the tag on the end, which brings us to our present insanity in the West. And, but again, whenever Natalie's half responsible for everything, I always get to go, well, hey, she had her part to play. It's beautiful. It's very clever for the John Michael wanting to get out of responsibility. It's very Garden of Eden-esque. Hey, it's this woman.
Yeah, this woman you gave me. She gave me the fruit. Yeah.
You should apologize to me.
Yeah.
I love it.
And that's a really good point too, because like with Shackleton, right? There were numerous times where he had members of his crew kind of do the wrong thing, right? And he could have been like, oh, well, because so-and-so messed up, we're all in this situation. He didn't do that. He owned it, right? And he's in charge. You don't gripe down, you only gripe up, right? So, he kept moving things forward. And so you have a very real world example of kind of how that plays out, of not abdicating your responsibility and owning it. I had a leader early in my military career say that that's called Mickey Mouse leadership, when you say, oh, well, battalion gave us this order, so that's why we got to do it. It's like, no, don't pass the buck. You own it. We're doing this because of this, right? And don't blame someone else for that or whatever.
It's good.
Anyway, Brandon, you were going, sorry.
Oh, no. So that's kind of exactly what I was wanting him to discuss. Let's dive a little bit more into like your family captain program. Let's talk about we know some of the results, like the feminine soft wife. What are some of the other results? Like you talked about, you mentioned sex, because sex is such a demonized thing in a lot of churches and a lot of society as far as man and wife. So maybe dive into that a little bit and talk about that with your program.
Yeah, man. So we start from the perspective that God loves sex and the devil hates sex. And what we mean by that is God designed sex. It was all his idea. If we look at sex in accordance with God's original design, it was for a husband and wife. He calls it good. And he invented every part of it. He invented, I don't know how wide our audience is here, but he invented all the grown-up parts. He invented everything that they do. He invented the pleasure. He invented the erection. All this, his design. Satan didn't sneak in and make some distortions here. Satan didn't come up with orgasms. All of this is God's intention. Is it uncomfortable? Maybe, because it's unfamiliar, but Christians should reclaim what belongs to our God. This is our jurisdiction because it's his jurisdiction. I can't help that the world and that Satan is a pervert and he perverts everything. He hates sex. So how can you prove that? Well, because he wants to distort God's good design. He wants everyone having sex except for a husband and wife. He wants every other possible combination happening except for those who have exchanged vows. And then he wants perversions and distortions. This is why he tries to, abuse us sexually as children through means and all kinds of possibilities. This is the pervasiveness of pornography. That's not a love of sex. That's a hatred of God's good design and a perversion of it. So we stand up, first of all, as the church and say, this belongs to our God. Christians should have the best marriages. Christians should have the best sex lives. Christians should have the best everything. Why? Well, because we have God. He's the king, and we're living in accordance to his ways. Why wouldn't we? Obviously. He's given us his own son. How will he not also give us all things freely? So clearly, these are just good gifts to enjoy. This is his goodness. This is his mercy. This is his kindness being poured out to us in yet another way where his opulence is made known to us. But yeah, the world they're busy making sex robots and that are more lifelike. And meanwhile, the church is like ashamed because our coffee maker in the fellowship hall says bun on it. And the only way I know to break past this stuff is to talk about it. Church
Absolutely.
ladies will be offended. My mission is not to offend them, but my mission is to still be a truth teller, no matter what the cost. So,
there's an entire book of the Bible about it,
bro. Man, I've been rereading Song of Solomon. I hadn't read it in a long time. Been rereading it the past 2 weeks. I'm just like, this is graphic.
Yeah, I mean,
like, I'm uncomfortable here, Lord. Not really, but yeah. So there's such a disconnect there, and I pretend there's not when I speak, and it can be pretty polarizing, and I know that. And at the same time, I'm not sorry for it because we help a lot of guys, and we help a lot of marriages to enjoy God's good gift. Sex is not a gift that wives give to husbands. Sex is not a gift that husbands give to wives. Sex is a gift that God has given to marriage. So we reframe all of this with the truth that sex is not just a physical thing. Sex is a spiritual thing, and sex is an emotional thing. It is an important nutrient that God has given to marriages for bonding, for obviously bringing children into the earth primarily, but for the pleasures that the Lord has connected to it, for comfort we see in Scripture as well. So we're continuing to encourage people in it to talk boldly. There's things that are private that need to stay private, obviously between a husband and wife, but the subject of sex can be talked about very plainly and very boldly. It's like no one will ever hear me discuss anything about me and Natalie privately, but in general, the concept and the teachings revolve around sex. Yeah, we can be bold and very enthusiastic in our teachings on it.
Right.
I love the word nutrient because it's such a binding thing in marriage, and it's such a necessary part. And there are men and women who just, I hear guys say, I get it maybe once a month or twice a year. And it's like, man, that's not a marriage. Like that's a very unhealthy situation right there. And there's a lot of things going wrong there that you got to start reviewing. So yeah, that's kind of why I wanted to touch on that. But one of the things I wanted to kind of touch back on was what it means to be a man. John Michael, knowing you and being friends with you for a while, I have seen personally, like you and Elijah, you did some rites of passages with your kids. Can you maybe jump into that and maybe teach some of these guys how they could do that in different stages of their kids' lives?
Yeah. So just right off the bat, guys, you got to remember you're in charge. You're the captain of the ship. Oh, can I do this? Can I do that? Bro, you make up the rules. You make up all the stages. You make up whatever you want. You're leading these kids. Nobody knows anything until somebody just makes something up. Think about the public school system. It has such like an honor and a reverence, like first grade, second grade, third grade. Like who made this crap up? Like we're just used to it. I'm not mad about it. I'm just saying somebody just made some crap up one day and everybody's like, all right, it's a system. It works. So fair enough. You can do the same thing when you're leveling up your kids. So what I've done with my boys, I only have sons, but I have different stages that I move them into. So my 7-year-old Hudson, he's just a little boy. That's all he is. He has not moved into any phase or stage yet. The first stage he will be moved into though is mature boyhood. So my middle son, Brock, he is in mature boyhood right now. My oldest son, Elijah, he is in young manhood. So they go from little boy, and then there's a day where I move them into mature boyhood. And then after the mature boyhood season, I'll move them into young manhood. And then there will be a day where I tell him, not the government, not their birthday, but there will be a day where his father says, now you are a man, and it will mean something. So that's how I've chosen to do it. I've worked with clients who have daughters, and we do it differently with them. And it should be different. different expectations for young men and young women as they mature. We're not pointing them to the same target. We're not pointing our kids toward adulthood. We're pointing our sons to manhood and our daughters to womanhood, not humanhood or adulthood.
Right.
So, I'm sorry, I haven't been paying attention to the chat. I need to do a better job reading along in the chat, because I was like, is the chat public? Can everybody see the chat? Was I not supposed to acknowledge the chat?
There's 2 chat. Yeah, there's comments, and then we got a private chat. So
oh, okay.
That's how us just talking to each other.
Yeah, so I was just wondering, I don't know if you can publicly share, like maybe if you put a chart together of some of those progressions, that's really interesting.
Yeah, but the point I was going to make is, like, I've done it at different ages with the other 2. So Elijah, he was born as like an old man. The dude was like 3 years old, and he's just like wise and weird and wonderful.
Full beard.
Right. Yeah. I'm just like, so I moved him into mature boyhood at, I think, age 9. But what we do is we mark the occasion. Now, you can make this work with any budget, so nobody gets to feel sorry for themselves and nobody gets to get out of this if you want to do this. But what needs to happen is it needs to be quality time with daddy. And, maybe you can get away. I think with him at our first one, my aunt was out of town and we just went and stayed at her house. So we got away from his mama and his brothers, and me and him just got away. We watched a couple man movies. But what's happening is there's some lessons that I'm putting into him. And there's a theme for this upcoming season in his life, something I want him to focus on and think about for the upcoming season of mature boyhood. Hey, you're not a little boy anymore. Here's what that means. And there's privilege that comes with this new season, maybe a little bit later bedtime, maybe something else, but there's responsibility that comes with this new season. These are the chores you're going to be doing. This is what I expect of you. So he's being knighted. He's being called up, and he's being encouraged. There's a gift that goes along with it. Maybe it's his first pocket knife, whatever. You can come up with something significant. But like I said, then there's a theme that I'm telling him, this is the focus. So Brock, who's in mature boyhood right now, he's moved out of boyhood into mature boyhood. Brock, the theme I gave him was always give it your all. So I'm looking at the weaknesses in my sons and I'm going, okay, what does this little boy need to hear? Hey, son, I need you to always give it your all. I see a character flaw in you. I see a weakness in you. And by the grace of God, you're going to grow out of this. So I want to see you focus on always giving it your all. That's the mission. That's the season that you're coming into for the next few years. So anyway, Elijah, I determined he was ready for young manhood. So he went into mature boyhood at 9. And then at age 13, I determined he was ready for young manhood. And the other part is they have to do something challenging, some sort of physical thing. Again, for a daughter, I would not have done this. But for a young man, I wanted to do something scary, something difficult. So I had him do like a ropes course, a big scary ropes course for one of them. Forget what the other one was. But then for my oldest, when he came into young manhood, there is a lighthouse out here in the Chesapeake Bay. It's called a floating lighthouse, but it's not floating. It's anchored into the bay. But his big challenge was he had to jump off of it. It was something I did when I was a teenager, and I took him out there and he had to jump off of it. But that was a weekend. We camped out on the beach. He got a new cool knife and a lot of lessons. But I also made a long list with him of, this is all the stuff you have to do before you're a man. And I tell you when you're a man. And it's a lot there. I mean, it's a lot on it. Like, it's hefty. It's not easy. He's got to get his blue belt in jiu-jitsu. He's barely got one stripe as a white belt. He's got a long journey there. He's got to, he's got to start a business. He's got to have so much money saved. He's got to kill and harvest a deer. There's a bunch. I can't even remember off the top of my head everything that's there, but change of tires on the list, all kinds of stuff like that. But there will come a day, and I'm meeting with him to work through these things and make sure we're actually hitting milestones and moving forward over the coming years. And then there's going to come a day where I tell him he's a man. But the point is, guys, like, all my details don't matter. What matters is it comes out of your heart. There's books, there's resources, but you could get lost in perfection instead of like, dude, what do you like? What do you care about? What kind of things do you want for your son? What kind of things? If I had daughters, Natalie would be more involved in this process heavily. But specifically because it's sons, I extract them from their mother, and I tell her, hey, when he comes back, he's going to be a mature boy. and she makes over them and they come back. Oh, my mature boy, their chest all swelled up. Or, oh, my young man. And I said, hey, this is a young man now. I'm naming him. I'm telling him I'm saying what grade he's in.
That's amazing.
Because that's who I am.
Huge.
I'm his head.
Wow.
I'm responsible for him. I'm knighting him in this new season. So the point is, you can do whatever the heck you want, but just be deliberate. You can pick the age, you can pick the stage, you can make it super budget friendly, but it's going to take some work. Which I always say, welcome to leadership.
Yeah.
I don't know any dads doing this. I know a bunch of dads who mostly let the wife take care of most of that stuff, and boys, girls, whatever it is. And this is like just wonderful hearing this, because it's such a fun, I'm getting excited just thinking about stuff that I want to do with my little guy. It's so fun.
Have fun with it, man.
Yeah.
Well, and I wanted to like kind of highlight one of the elements of it that you like really drew out too is like, especially with boys and men, right? We really appreciate a symbol, right? We're very tangible creatures.
You want badges or hang on.
Well, so like Napoleon boasted he can make a man do anything for a scrap of ribbon. I mean, look at it. Look at the military. Look at all the crazy things people go through to get a Ranger tab or all these other, these honors. And like, like the military coin tradition is a huge thing. And like just giving a soldier a coin for doing something good, like even as a grown adult, you just see them light up, and so especially with sons, take that seriously. Like whether it's a knife or something else, that symbol, it may seem a little silly, but because it came from you, it's going to mean a ton. And there's a book called Wild at Heart, I think is a great example of kind of John Michael, what you were just talking about, kind of the passage of boyhood to manhood. But Dustin, I agree with you. Like it's a completely lost art. It used to be a cultural thing, right? Like if you go way back into kind of like tribal societies, the boys had to go out with the men and learn how to hunt and bring back the food to the tribe and all those kinds of things. And it used to just be an ingrained thing in society. And now with the lives we live in the modern era with technology and everything, it's kind of men are just watered down. Boys are watered down to a thing with different anatomy.
It's the live androgyny, and it's even being proud of androgyny. It's being proud of it. He can play with that. She can play with that. We're proud of it. We're proud that there's no distinctions. Meanwhile, God rejoices in the distinctions he's made. He loves mountains and he loves valleys. He loves deserts and he loves oceans. He loves light and dark. He loves hard and soft. He loves hot and cold. And we go, let's flatten it all. And it's not. It's the spirit of the age. It is Satan. It is satanic. And it's an effort, again, to distort and pervert what God calls good.
Yeah, it's like when everyone's special, no one is. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah, and what's sad now is like the rites of passage that kids are getting passively is driver's license, who's going to drink, when they can drink, and cell phones. And I mean, like, what is that putting in a kid's mind?
Yeah.
There's no goal, no direction. The parents are not the ones that the kids are oriented to. They're peer oriented. And so then you show them the 5 direct friends that they have, and it's like those 5 kids are going to be the ones that mold your kid into something.
That's a great point. Think about the demonic rite of passage that Satan has created. First, porn exposure. Like these are the new rites of passage.
Which statistically, the first exposure is 7 to 8 years old now, by the way.
Oh, God.
Yep.
That's
too young.
So like my daughter's
exposure,
age.
First sexual encounter. First drug use. Like these are the modern rites of passage.
Yeah.
And those are the things that people celebrate the most.
Right.
And like some parents even support it. Like let their kids, if you're going to party at my house or party with me. It's like, what are you doing? You're just like giving them the free range, handing them a gun that they've never used and saying, go have fun.
Yeah.
So kind of silly example here. I played baseball for 8 years as a kid. I got 4 trophies a year, and they were always participation trophies. They were never like, you did a good job, because I was terrible at baseball. I like had a 0 batting. I was awful. Right. But I wasn't not athletic. I was just really bad at baseball, but I thought I was good because I had a rack full of trophies. Started playing tennis, didn't really get any trophies. Became a tennis instructor for 10 years. I'm a very good tennis player. I think I have 1 trophy. So it's very confusing to a kid when you get all these accolades and wonderful things that you didn't earn at all. I think if a coach had been merciful with me and said, hey, bud, you're terrible, go pick a different sport, it would have saved me 5 years this.
And you get to a point where you kind of know, right? Like, I didn't do as good as the guy who won first. You know what I mean? Like,
but we got the same trophy. So what's going on?
Well, yeah. So like, I remember the first time I ran into that where I just like, I was a kid, but I was just like incensed beyond all measures. My first Junior Olympics, and I spent the whole summer like I was like one of those freaks who like goes off to camp, like some training camp and never comes home type of thing. I was there like 12 hours a day, and I worked really hard, and I had to win like 9 matches, and I got bronze. I got 3rd place. And then they handed out all these participation trophies at the Junior Olympics in the United States to all the kids who lost like the first round, second round, whatever. And they got like this pewter colored medal, same medal, just the same logo and everything, same size. And it almost looked bronze. And I was like so pissed. I'm like, I had to win 8 or 9 matches. I've been sparring for like, because you have to go and you're a huge class, so you got to like wait for hours to the next match. And I mean, it's this huge ordeal. I was like 9 or 8 at the time. And I just remember thinking like, are you kidding me? Like they're getting this basically the same medal as me, and not that I'm like some special gift to the world or whatever, but like I earned 3rd place, and I'm still not even the best. This guy beat me, he got
George
first.
was super pissed at you, Dustin.
Yeah.
I was that millennial.
But I mean, like, I kind of like looked at the other kids, but I still remember like the other kids weren't like excited about getting this trophy. Because they knew they lost. You know what I mean? It's like, and so it just
made their mom feel better.
I guess.
Right, it made the parents feel better. That's all. Yeah, exactly.
Congrats.
Becky felt great about it.
But I'd still argue like even the guys who lost the first round, they still learned something about themselves that they probably take to this day. Like, hey, I made it to the Junior Olympics. You have to win at state. You have to win at like regionals. You have to win all these to even get there. And then you're still competing against the best. So even to just try yourself against the best, even if you just get creamed, you still learn something more about yourself than never trying it in the first place, right?
So I think that ties into what my definition of becoming a man for me was failing consistently and getting through those failures, getting burned by that fire, that sadness of failing and and getting through that. And that to me, I think was when I realized I've achieved manhood, because I've gotten over these really difficult things. And if somebody just given me a trophy and said, well, you didn't fail, you did fine, don't worry about it. And no, I needed to understand I failed. I lost. I did not win. Other men did better than me. I can rank myself against that. And I learned that. And then that was a crucial moment for me, because that was a lot of that was hidden for me as a child. I had a single mom who, didn't want to see me fail, didn't want to see me cry. She coddled me a lot. And I love my mom. She, did a great job. She's wonderful. But a lot of the environment that I was put in was designed to never help me understand that I had failed or that I wasn't good at something. Everything I did was equal. So things I was really good at, you're good at. Okay. But I didn't know I was better at that than things. It's very confusing for a young man or a young boy when you don't let them know, wow, you're good at this, and this you're not so good at. You need that feedback. And it was tough.
And you're still loved. God still loves you.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the key. Of course, you don't not love your son because he failed. That's the other end of that spectrum. That's
right. But I think that's what drives. When people don't have Christ, like, this stuff matters. That freaking T-ball trophy matters. Everything matters. Because I don't have a real foundation. So my accomplishments are my value. And if I haven't accomplished, I have no value. Now, obviously, for those in Christ, this is where we're supposed to be able to go, I did fail, which is what Dustin's able to talk about. Like, I failed, but I don't have to feel defeated. I don't have to feel worthless. Like, God loves me.
Yep.
I'm still secure in the Father's hand. Now with that, I have freedom to move forward again and try again, because this thing wasn't a definition. The grade I got on the report card, thank God my parents didn't use my report card as a value system for my worth. And, same thing with my boys. Like, if they can't succeed at something, I say, did you give it your best? No, sir. All right. Then I'm not happy. That's unacceptable. But did you give it your best? Yes, sir. I love it. And that was a phrase I've gotten used to saying with them when they would lose a wrestling match or lose anything. I'd say, I love watching you wrestle. Yeah. I love watching you wrestle, son. Go out there and fight.
Yeah. And for me, failing, losing, and suffering were the only things that grew me growing up. And so, like, one of the things I've been intentional with my son, now that he's starting to get older and he's starting to come more into this world, like, I had to pick up the slack of his soccer coach. His soccer coach just vamped, disappeared. Nobody was picking it up. So I picked up that title. I became his soccer coach. And every time they lost, I told them they lost. They said, did we win? It was 3-4. I said, no, you lost. And here's where we can improve. And so like one of the things I'm intentional with is like letting my son understand he's losing or he's failing. And like I'll ask him, I want him to be comfortable with the thought of failing, because failing is totally normal. It's first attempt in learning. That's the way I look at it. And so like I say, son, what'd you fail at today? And if he comes back and says, oh, I didn't fail at anything, I'm like, man, like I'm not disappointed, but I'm like, man, I just wish you were, I wish you would have failed in something or tried something.
Tried at something, boy.
Yeah. And like,
That's excellent, man.
Yeah. And I'll always applaud the effort, but I'll always say, hey, look, from a loving perspective, this is what you can get better on. And this is how you can fix this part, And so I'm just slowly dipping him into that water that the world is, where failure and brutality and just chaos and everything else is, you got to prep them somehow. And I feel like suffering is one of those things you slowly integrate them into, because you can't just let them just be traumatized. But yeah, either way. So John, I think you were wanting to add something to that.
Go ahead, John, Michael, and then I got something on the whole failure thing after that.
Yeah, as a dad, I've had to learn, again, to get away from androgyny and to stop living just like a parent, but to be a father. And I've had to be mindful of Natalie's strengths, to encourage those, to receive those, but to not let those overrule mine. Natalie's a nurturer. That's what a mama is supposed to be. She's supposed to be nurturing and gentle. But if I defer to her too much, she's going to hear me say strong things to our sons. And if she's not careful, she could try and overrule. Oh my goodness, you can't say that to him. That was no. I reassured my love. I reassured his value, but he's still going to hear truth from his father. He's still going to hear strength. And of course, that's a great buffer there for Natalie to say, hey, if there's times where daddy is too intense, for Natalie to gently follow up with me later. Hey, babe, I think it was a lot. I think it was heavy. I think whatever. And I'm able to process again, so that he's not coddled. And at the same time, so that he's not exasperated, right? So that his father doesn't place demands on him and treat him like a grown man when he's not. But that's something that I've enjoyed with Natalie, us both growing in over the years, appreciating what one another bring. And it's hard for her because she is a mama and she only has 3 boys, and she knows. And I've continued to talk with her like, baby, they're going to have to slay dragons. They're coming up in a harder world, a more difficult world, and we've got to prepare them for war. So like, even whenever I have the boys wall sit, if somebody's been disrespectful or hit their brother or out of control, instead of a spanking or instead of whatever else, I go, hey, is that funny when you hurt your brother? And if they're laughing about something, go wall sit. Let's see if it's funny.
That's good.
And I'm calm, but he's sitting there and he's chuckling for the first 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 6 minutes in, he starts tearing up. And this is when Natalie has a hard time sometimes. And but in recent years, she's looked at him and going, this is good for you. This is one of the easiest things you'll ever do in your life. And I'm just like, she sees it. I don't want to make her harsh,
right?
But she's still tender, she's still feminine, but it's helpful to understand the dynamics, but to not cave. I think in a lot of marriages, it's tempting for dad to be overruled. Mom go, oh my goodness, honey, and he's, oh, you can't do that with him all the time, sweetie. Don't back up, Dad. We're not trying to be offensive, but we need to be strong.
Yeah. So I'd love to kind of segue from that. So two things. One is you highlighted the beauty of the balance between how God created women and how God created men, and we are naturally harsher. We're very task oriented. We see the goal, we see the vision, we want to push towards it. No matter the cost, type of thing. And then your wife is a beautiful, complementing creature that's going to help rein you in sometimes, and so that balance creates a great environment for kids. But the second too, like you said, is you're still in charge, right? You're the leader, and a leader's job is to drive out excellence from his subordinates. And in this case, not in a authoritative sense, but it's an act of love. It's an act of servant leadership to understand that it's pain today that you're going to feel, but because I love you and I care about you being better than you are today, I know that you need to experience it and go through this struggle, because when you come out the other side, you'll have learned something that only this can teach you. And so, I've learned that heavily from the military sense, right? I still combat it today as a commander in the Guard, where, oh, sir, that's too much. You can't have them do that. That's exactly what they need to do, right? And everyone's going to complain because it's hard and it's scary and it's challenging, but like, I've been there, I've done it. So I have the luxury of perspective, but you can do the same thing with your kids. And so I think, John Michael, you bring up a really good point of kind of holding that line with your kids so that, or with your wife, so that you still get to that end result, not overbearing, but, ensuring that ultimately they are improved through the experience.
Right.
And last point on failure, I had a great, it was actually one of my earlier commanders. He called them, every time you mess up, it was a training scar. And I love that
A training
term.
scar?
A training scar, right? So you get a little scar, and it's not really going to kill you, right? It's a little cut, it hurt a little bit, but later in your life, you're going to look at it and go, oh yeah, when I did that, this hurt. I'm not going to do that anymore. And so that's what failure is. It hurts a little bit. It's a little bit of a scar, but ultimately you're going to have all these scars on you, and you'll be, smarter and more wise and get through it without getting cut again.
Amen.
Do you plan at all, John Michael, if your sons, let's say they refuse to do a wall sit? Let's say you say, hey, you've got to give me a 5-minute wall sit. He says, absolutely not. Forget you, Dad. Do you have kind of a contingency plan for how to handle different behavioral challenges?
Well, I'm laughing because I would literally laugh if one of my sons said, no, I'm not. So I'd be like, haha, you got me. Now go on. That was funny, son. But yeah, I mean, every situation is different, right? So, man, what if I've got that kid who would just be like, no? Ultimately, I got to make sure I don't get triggered. I got to make sure I don't get egotistical, but I absolutely will have consequence. You will not trump me. You will not go farther than me. Hey, son, I don't know what just happened to your brain, but I'm going to be merciful and I'm going to give you another chance to go wall sit right now. And I'll pretend that you didn't just say that to me. I'm not wall sitting. Son, you just lost screens for the rest of the week at a minimum. You like whatever. Immediately things are going away from his life. And if he starts to spiral in that moment, I'm probably not going to keep going up the staircase because he's essentially having a 2-year-old tantrum, but as a 10-year-old. And we don't spank a 2-year-old in the middle of the tantrum. That's nonsense. Afterwards, when everything's calm and the hugs and kisses have been given, now we say, Daddy loves you very much, and your behavior was unacceptable, and now you're going to be spanked because I love you, and the Bible says you have foolishness stored up in your heart, and I'm going to drive it out of you. It's you and me and the Lord against foolishness. A 10-year-old, a 15-year-old could do the same thing. And if I get egotistical, I'm going to start going, 2 weeks, car keys, you're dead.
Right, yeah. I mean, it's an arms race. It's not discipline. Right?
Sure.
At that point.
Yeah. It's, I'm offended. And like and he's I don't care. Now he does care, but he's emotional. So ultimately, yes, though, like I'm escalating. I'm escalating because I have to use my authority to do what's best for you. Because at that point, what if he's saying, and I say, son, go to your room. I'm going to follow up with you later and explain to you the consequences and what you've chosen as you've dishonored your father, your mother, whatever the case may be. But there's got to be escalation at the same time, making sure that it's not, you guys know this. I don't want to parent from the place of, that's it.
Yeah.
Because that's reactionary.
Well, that's tyranny, right? Like if you have to remind your subordinates of your rank, so to speak, right? They don't respect you. You're not leading. You're being a tyrant and you're abusing your position of power over them, and it's not. Like
The Art of Manliness has a great article I recommend all the time. It's called "Parent Like a Video Game," and in it, Brett McKay makes the point: in a video game, you get calm, consistent consequences every single time. When Mario jumps on the cactus, you just go back here. Nobody comes out and screams at you. Nothing crazy happens. Or the analogy of a referee in a basketball game. If I call traveling that time, I have to call traveling every time.
Yeah.
If I call a double dribble, I have to always call a double dribble. Well, that's hard as a parent. I know. Yes, I know. I'm tempted to yell through the house instead of go in the other room and father. But like the calm, consistent consequences ultimately are going to be the key to make sure I don't have those absurd moments where a child will look at me and go, no, because I'm going, what do you mean no? You don't tell me no. So yeah, calm, consistent consequences, but that would be a great article, really helpful. I revisit it from time to time.
I like that. I'll definitely. I've read a lot of that. I used to read a lot of their stuff a while ago, but yeah, I'll look into that.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think that's a real challenge for fathers is to provide consistent discipline. It's much easier to fly off the handle and be, very upset one day and then too lenient the next day. And I think that's that's the worst, right? Is to go to extremes either way all the time. And that consistent discipline, I think that takes planning, that takes practice to do that. And most of us don't treat our personal lives the way we treat our work lives, with the same rigor. I would never go into the operating room with no plan and just winging it. But I do that all the time at home, and that's not fair to my wife and not fair to my son. So I really, this is good motivation for me to have that plan ready to go.
That's super good.
Yeah. And I think really good leadership is, in an event where discipline has to occur, is you yourself taking a moment or longer and processing it yourself. And, especially if there's multiple parties involved, right? Oh, he hit me. No, he did this, whatever. I don't know the situation, but is thinking about all what really happened and then going into very measured, serious response yourself. And, obviously when they're little, it's a little bit more like, no, don't touch the stove. It's hot. It's a little different, but as they grow, you can have a more mature and engaged interaction with them. Right. But, and then that's something too, just outside of parenting, that's a leadership principle that I think is extremely important for any leader, right? And anyone can immediately berate someone for doing the wrong thing or being out of line or whatever, but it takes a lot of self-discipline and patience to kind of evaluate the situation, still not withhold the punishment due, so to speak, the consequences, but conducting that in a way that they will actually receive it, have a chance to receive it. Because if it's given with harshness, they're going to immediately get defensive, and the lesson won't be drawn out of it. So, not that I'm perfect at it, but that's that's what you strive to do.
That's what I've had to try. If I'm just being transparent, one of the things I've had to try so hard for myself is, when I was a kid with 3 other brothers, and all my other brothers were the ones that were the wild childs, and the ones that would tell my mom and dad no and get in lots of trouble. Like, I was the good kid, so like their issues came up for me and I fixed them myself. So a lot of my emotional reaction about a decade ago was just to self-isolate. Like, if people made me angry or a situation made me angry, I just isolated. I removed myself. But as a parent, you can't do that. So like, I had to really take a good hard look at my emotional intelligence, and I had to grow myself and go back into past traumas, and I had therapy. I had all kinds of things to just try to figure out how to course correct from being so far off the path for so long. And eventually I did get to that point. And now it's like, man, I've broken a cycle for my kids, and I've spared them from it. And so for me, I'm constantly working on emotional intelligence. And even when I think I'm great now, but like, it's still not good enough. I'm still going to keep growing, even if it's just 1% a day. So, but yeah, for me,
one more thing
sure.
to tie back into what George was talking about. It's just such an important point that he made. You have so much freedom. So every situation does not call for the same thing. And I think that brings us back to Shackleton. Like, there's moments where you're thinking, oh, he's about to drop the hammer on this guy, and he doesn't. You go, oh, I thought this is man culture. I thought I've got like a bunch of burly men fighting for survival. We don't have any room and any tolerance for this kind of insubordination. Shackleton is about to drop this dude right where he's standing, and he doesn't. And I remember reading that and learning, like, oh, every situation isn't the same, or as a father, oh, it's not always a spanking, or it's not always a wall sit. And great points you guys are making about as the kids mature. Absolutely. It opens up so many more possibilities. Just yesterday, Natalie, or was it today? Natalie was dealing with Hudson, and she was like, he has been difficult. And she told me what she did, because Hudson gets plenty of spankings. But she took time. She talked with him. She prayed with him. And she didn't bring him any kind of consequence with whatever he was doing. So we have freedom. We don't want to get stuck in. And again, as guys, we're tempted towards a formula, right? Like, just tell me what to do. I'll be rock hard. Well, the thing to do is to have the wisdom of God.
Right.
That's the thing. That's the big unlock. Once you got the wisdom of God, you're good to go. Yeah. So yes, there's some best practices for us. But all these things are to be our servant, not the other way around, as we lead and shepherd these people well.
Absolutely.
Really good. I wanted to, I never answered the, what is the definition of a man that Dustin posed earlier, which is a great question for our discussion tonight, Dustin. So as always, you're the one kind of provoking all the thoughts. Very similar to you, John Michael. I feel like, for the most part, my life was going well and everything, and on the outside, it probably looked like everything was good. And it's not my quote. It's actually Ben Affleck who said it, but when he believes that he became a man when he started thinking of the world in terms of himself and started thinking of it in the terms of his children. And not that he's like some amazing role model or whatever, but the sentiment is really good. I think, it was at that point in my life, I think it was about 28 is when I really, it wasn't the bravado anymore or any of that kind of stuff. It was the quiet confidence knowing that, okay, this is what right looks like. This is what I need to do because it's not just about me. This is what's best for my wife. It's what's best for my daughter. And that means accepting accountability for my failures, my mistakes, not making excuses, inviting accountability from other men to rebuke me and all that kind of stuff. And I didn't do that until I was, truly 28, 29. And, as I was reading the book too, it reminded me of kind of that same principle of, that's why like young men are all cocky and really vocal, right? About, especially when you're like playing a pickup game of basketball or something. It's always the younger guy talking the most crap, right? And really what that is, it's because when you're a younger man, you haven't been tested yet fully. You haven't been through as much life and had as much challenge or adversity that you've come out the other side and survived in. And so instead of having a quiet, calm confidence and understanding of the situation, it's all bravado and projection. And it's really just from a sense of insecurity. And so by this point, 28 years old, I'd been deployed, I'd been in the Army for a long time. I've done all these quote, really hard things that the world says are, that's what makes a man. But it was very one dimensional. It wasn't there wasn't any depth to that experience. It made one part of me a man. It didn't make all of me a man. On the inside, I was still a little boy projecting my insecurities. And I didn't have all these rites of passage like you're doing with your sons. My parents divorced when I was 16. It was really messy. And so, I thought, oh, the Army is what will make me a man type of thing, right? That'll prove that I'm a man. I've led people in combat, right? Sure, in one aspect. But, the rest of me was still a teenage kid. And so it's a very complicated question. I don't think there's one true definition in terms of like when you become a man, but I think there are some specific elements that it's a real man is very holistic in his approach to the world. And you're a warrior and a poet. You're the scholar and the fighter. And on top of that, it's kind of like Tender Warrior, right? I really love how he breaks it down into the 4 elements. And I think that until you get to that point, you're still kind of just a boy in a lot of ways. And especially in our society today, manhood is it's shot down. It's not encouraged. It's not something that young boys aspire to be, right? It's not like I grew up like wanting to be an action hero, right? We all had like Arnold and all the action movies. And nowadays it's all like all the men are weak and stupid. And, there's no, like, even in pop culture, there's no like thing that young boys can look to and be like, I want to be that.
I want to be an influencer.
Right. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
So so of course, how, no wonder why like adult men, young men who are like in their 20s, early 20s today are just floundering around without any purpose. Cause one, they've never been encouraged to be more. And 2, they're honestly just terrified of ridicule, because if they actually do be, kind of an alpha male or whatever term you want to use, they're going to receive criticism on all fronts.
You could lose your job. Yeah, there's a lot of risks.
Yeah, you can be canceled, all kinds of stuff. So, and
it's working. I mean, average sperm count among American males is half what it was 50 years ago. Testosterone levels are down 60, 70%. It's affecting our physiology. It's crazy. Yeah.
Sorry, I rambled a little bit, but it's a topic I'm pretty passionate about. So
it's good, man. You just point out what we were already saying. Like, it's the wisdom of God. There's certainly some guideposts for everything. The Lord has laid them out in his word. And at the same time, there's levels. And something I teach my clients all the time. Where are you on a 1 to 10? Well, when you start to approach 10, the Lord shows you that the scale goes to 100. You start to approach 100, the Lord shows you it goes to 1,000, and that's a blessing. That's a beautiful thing, because the Lord builds your influence. As you have proven faithful in a season, then the Lord always rewards faithfulness. He keeps perfect books, and as we continue to level up, then He'll bring more responsibility and more privilege of influence, ultimately, because we're doing what He wants for the reasons He wants it.
So Dustin, I want to flip the question back to you now that we've had this pretty lengthy discussion. So what do you think, or when did you become a man, or what do you think defines that?
Okay. I think it's different for everyone, for sure. But for me personally, it was the ability to overcome challenges I didn't think I'd be able to overcome.
Sorry, you kind of touched on that.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that was the real key for me, was to get over that hill. I was talking to a friend about this last week. He said we as men need to, pardon the expression, to kill ourselves a little bit sometimes, to have that feeling that you are being challenged. And if we don't have that when we're too comfortable, our lives are not as rich. It's amazing the rates of depression in this country, right? I mean, we have all the food we could possibly want. We have all the entertainment we could possibly want. We're never, too cold, too hungry, any of this, and we're miserable. Yep. Right? How does that happen? We have everything we could possibly want. All of our material needs are met. So what are we missing? There's clearly something, that's not there for so many men in our culture. And so the work that you're doing, John Michael, is fantastic to help bring meaning. Because at the end of the day, if I have meaning and purpose, and I'm freezing, I'm much happier than someone who, yeah, absolutely. Yep. Good times create weak men. Yeah, exactly. I'm going to be much happier than someone who, has everything they need and, doesn't know what to do with it. We're in this age of abundance. And our free time is being taken by so many areas, and it's making us absolutely miserable. I can't tell you how many friends I have who are so unhappy, and they have everything. They're rich. They've got great kids. Their wives are wonderful, and they're miserable. It's something we really are doing our best to address, because it's not getting better.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I think for me personally, well, I think Matt Walsh would probably have a good documentary if he went around asking what a man is, in comparison to his other questions.
Hot take.
Yeah. For me, though, a man is someone who endures in the face of all adversity in his life, all misfortunes, all chaos, and comes out growing stronger. Doesn't give up and just continues to push forward, even if it's 1 inch at a time and he gets set back 10 feet. I've considerably had many examples of that emotionally, mentally, physically, where I just felt like I was just in the lowest of lows, and I just kept pushing through, man. And the endurance was what got me through it. But I think Christ was the other missing puzzle piece for me. I was happy, but I wasn't joyful. And so becoming a man to me is continuously growing in all facets of life, and having the humility and putting the pride and the ego aside to grow in all facets, where you're weak, where you're strong. You just have to accept everything and attack all of it. But most importantly, to be, especially if you're a godly man, is to be a good father, a good son, and a good dad or husband, excuse me. So like you said, there's a lot of facets that play into it, but for me, it's just the growth and endurance. Like I thought there was a quote when Shackleton was talking about changing the name of his ship from Polaris to the Endurance. I think it was Fortitudine Vincimus, which is by endurance we conquer. And man, did they do that. I mean, it was the most ironic part of the whole book, is that what he was christening his ship with was what they needed the most in their journey. So yeah, that's, to me, there's a couple facets there, but yeah, that's kind of what I feel. So
it's good. Yeah, I think as men, it's just absolutely critical that, or to become a man, you have to have trial of some sort. And the world today is so risk averse, so anti-struggle, and everyone gets a trophy and all this kind of stuff. It's just a loser victim mentality, right? And I'm not aiming at you, Dustin, just that, but And yeah, I mean, the most successful people on earth, whether it's sports or whatever, 99.9% of them failed over and over and over, and they just never gave up, and they learned, and they kept getting those scars, and then eventually they became really good at what they did, right? Yes, of course, like, athletes have insane amounts of talent and all that kind of stuff. That's like table stakes, right? But how many super talented people accomplish virtually nothing in their life? You hear tons of stories, right? Oh, number one recruit, then he started doing drugs and his life is in shambles now, right? Like, he had the gifting, but he never had the endurance and the determination to resist the thing. Anyway, so I think for men especially, right? I mean, all kids need discipline and correction, but boys becoming men, the physical element of things is just very in tune with us as creatures. And so not going through some of that, you can be the worst kid on the team, doesn't matter, but having to play a sport and having to push yourself at practice and be tired and sweat and your shin hurts and, Bobby, called you a name or whatever, like that's a life skill that is going to benefit you for the rest of your life. And, I mean, foregoing that with your children, not letting them experience any of that, is maybe in the short term feels like you're loving them, but honestly, you are setting them up for extreme failure and then not having the tools for how to deal with adult situations. Because, I mean, so as you grow physically, right, your emotional intelligence is supposed to match it through life experience and teaching from your parents and coaches and things like that. But if they never get those emotional tools, they'll still be a 5, 6, 10-year-old kid trapped inside that body. And then what happens if a loved one dies, or they have to go through a divorce, or there's some horrible life experience, and they're still stuck at age 12 emotionally, and now they have to deal with something that when they're 30 or whatever that they never learned how to deal with, and that's the first time they're dealing with it. Probably not going to go so well. So
yeah, whatever. I strongly believe this, but whatever we don't teach and prepare our children for, the world will brutally do it for them
in the wrong way.
Yeah. So that's why I'm so persistent about just trying to prep my kid for everything in every facet of life, because anything I forget or fail to teach him, the world's going to teach him in their own perverted way, and they're going to do it in a brutal manner. One of my responsibilities as a dad is to make sure I'm preparing him for that, or her for that.
So, John Michael, question for you. When you work with clients, have you had any that have had wives that are resistant to the idea of their husband being a leader, right? That are more mainstream in their ideas that, it should be 50-50, or I'd rather have most of the leadership on my own. How are you able to work with people like that? Like what have you seen that situation before and found ways to overcome it?
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen a lot of guys. So I worked with over 120 guys in a really intense capacity. So we've seen the full spectrum, from guys who like, man, we're at a 9 and we want to go to a 10. Those are always super fun. And because they're the ones who get to find out they go to 100. And I've worked with ones who, man, my wife has left me 3 times in the past 4 years and she's gone now. So, and everything in between. So it's a real temptation for a lot of women, again, because of the spirit of the age and because of their own sinful temptations, to grasp for control. And from day one, I just teach the brothers that I'm working with, who ask that question, what if my wife won't let me lead? That's another way we put it. And the answer is, brother, good news. Nobody can stop you. No, but she won't do what I tell her. Well, brother, you've just revealed to me you got a really immature understanding of leadership, which is good news, because we're going to help. Is there a place for authority and actual direction giving? Most definitely. The problem is right now, you don't have that kind of leadership capital in the bank. Should she follow before God? Absolutely. Is she in sin? Most likely. And yet here we are. So how do we navigate the days ahead? So with those guys, with all my guys, we focus on self-leadership, being the greatest man that this woman has ever known, truly transforming as a guy, not to make mama happy, but because it's what's right, it's what's good, and it's what pleases the Lord. So truly finding ways to look in the mirror, looking at ways to shepherd the kids, looking at ways to bless the household that don't turn you into the family butler, truly turn you into the family captain. But you serve. I believe in servant leadership only in the way when I say it like this. I am using my leadership to serve my family. That is how the king serves the kingdom. You do not need the king washing your clothes. Oh, he's such a servant leader. Bro, could you go lead the freaking nation, please? There's things that's how you serve us, is with your role, is with your position. So we show family captains what that looks like. And we're building leadership capital. That guy is probably in debt. His wife is afraid. She's fearful. She's anxious. She's probably depressed a lot of times. Christian marriages, unfortunately, I'm describing right now. And she's fearful. She is exactly what Scripture warns her against. You can be like Sarah, who called Abraham Lord, but don't fear anything that is frightening. So there's a challenge to leadership. I think everybody says that's pretty obvious, but there's a challenge to submission for a wife to trust, especially if this is her boy husband, John Michael, who hasn't been captaining the ship. He's got some elements that are good. He provides resources. I know he would protect me if the bad guys came, but I still get the sense that I am the one responsible to keep this whole thing glued together. That makes me nervous. So now John Michael's showing up, beating his chest, acting like there's a new sheriff in town. No, she's not rolling with that. Well, should she? Yeah. Yep. But am I going about this the wisest way? So in our coaching, Dustin, yeah, we work with brothers and we get in their unique situation. Hey, man, what's up? What's the deal? What's she pushing back on? Oh, what would she say if you said, I'm taking you on a date Friday night and I've already got the kids squared away? Oh, dude, she would say, heck no, you're not. They can't stay with your parents because blah, blah, blah. Okay, all right. Like, we keep going upriver and we find the solution. Cool. We find where we can start. My clients try to stump me, but they fail because I won't let them get stuck. And we always find a path forward. We find where he can take action. We find where he can take his ownership and start to level up again, not with her permission and not trying to trigger her. We're not going in there teaching her about headship and submission. We're not teaching her anything. We're just saying, making her go, who is that? I haven't seen that guy around here before. That was different. That was new. And so there's a million little things. Rule number one, I tell guys, whenever you want to lead your wife, is stop following your wife. It's funny. A lot of marriages claim they're 50-50. They're not. I know that, and the wife knows that. She is in charge. And so on paper, Christian marriages claim to be 50-50. Functionally, they are absolutely matriarchal, which is why we tell our dumb jokes. If mama ain't happy, nobody's happy. I'm in the doghouse. I'll be sleeping on the couch. I better ask the boss. It's funny if it's an actual joke, but we have become the joke. And our wives resent us for it. They don't trust us anymore. And a lot of times in our immaturity, we show up like Saddam Hussein, and she's going, this is scary. This is intimidating. Yeah. Because we don't have any wisdom on how to navigate and move things forward. All we know to say is, ooga booga. And she's like, you're not that guy. You're not that guy.
John, what do we call him?
Become that guy, though.
What's our nickname for people like that?
Melvin.
Sorry to all the Melvins out there. I'm sure you're great.
Man, so I've been using Melvin for years, and Natalie's like, what are you going to do when you get a client named Melvin? You're like, I'm going to love him, and he's going to have a good sense of humor because I'm not my strongman stereotype.
Oh, man.
I have a less delicate term. They're soy boys or beta males.
Right.
Yeah.
But man, when this has been built, when this is the water we've swum in, this is the air we've been breathing, like we've come to genuinely believe that this is good. Oh my goodness, she's upset. Clearly, that's evidence that I've done something wrong. Her tears are proof that I've sinned. Like pastors have taught that way. Christian men have been made to feel that that's a true statement. She's upset. Obviously, you're doing it wrong, Melvin. If you were doing it right, she would never be upset with you. Yeah. Oh, my goodness. So I need to do whatever she wants. Of course, this downward spiral continues. She's in control, which burdens her with the responsibility, which makes her anxious. And at the same time, her respect for you decreases. Oh, this is complicated. Well, it's the nature of the masculine and feminine. She is going to always test you for strength. And a lot of times she steps out onto that ice to go, can you really hold me?
Right.
And we crack and go, no.
Yep.
And the cycle continues.
That's a great
and
point.
Guess who that wife doesn't want to sleep with? That beta male.
Exactly.
I don't no, Dustin. My wife has a low drive. You don't know. It's for my wife has a low drive. It's not about me not being a man. It's not about me being a rock who can handle her and lovingly put her in her place. It has nothing to do with that, Dustin. My wife just has a low drive. I think she needs to go to the doctor.
Yeah.
That's all it is. It's not about me. That couldn't possibly be the case.
It's a really good point you raised, because women instinctively do BS tests, right? With everyone, but especially their potential lover.
And that's a feature. That's not a flaw.
Right. It's because they are generally smaller and weaker, they have to attack the world in a different way. They have to test the world in a different way. Like you said, we just unga bunga our way around with a big old club and hit everything, right? Women are the polar opposite. They're testing constantly, and then pile on anxiety and fear and everything else, and then those tests get pretty, frequent or whatever. But if you, as a man, can have the calm, quiet confidence that I was talking about earlier, to understand that that's all it is. They just need that reassurance. It's not you. You know what I mean? Just be steadfast, and the tests will kind of answer themselves, right? You don't have to play into it, right? In fact, just the opposite. If you almost bat it off like it's not a thing, that kind of answers the test, right? They're looking for masculinity, not a little boy trying to seek approval type of thing.
Sure.
The other element too that you kind of touched on is initially too, when you start trying to better yourself, and especially if it's in the realm of like working with the counselor or a coach like John Michael, and you start making legitimate changes that are going to improve you and your leadership role, your wife is probably going to initially react with hostility, right? Because it's a BS test. She's going to test it and be like, oh, well, he's just doing this to manipulate me, right? So things might actually get worse initially. If your relationship is really strained, that's like a clinical phenomenon almost always, that when one spouse starts making legitimate improvement to try and improve their marriage, the other spouse actually gets worse and reacts harshly to things a lot, because it's kind of just a human thing where we just assume the worst about that person right now.
Well, sabotage.
So, yeah. So
I feel condemnation.
Yeah,
I see you leveling up and making effort. I feel convicted by that.
Yeah.
I see you stop eating sugar. Hey, I made your favorite dessert.
Right. Yep. Exactly. So
put the cookie down, Dustin.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that kind of sabotage. It's no.
Yeah, but you got to have that endurance to push through that, and especially as a man, right? So, I love how you bring it up. Oh, well, she should do this. Absolutely, she should. But we're here to talk about what you can control, and that's you and your actions. And so I just love how right up from the front you really called that out, because again, we've grown up in a society where it's always somebody else's fault, and that's not what men do. Men do not shift blame. Men do not point the finger at someone else. We accept responsibility. And so with your kids too, if you do overreact poorly to a discipline situation, go apologize. Hey, I was out of line in the way that I responded to your misbehavior or whatever, right? However old they are, make it right. Same thing with your spouse, with your wife. If you are out of line, go acknowledge it, to her. Hey, I was wrong. That's what men do, and leaders do, is they accept that responsibility and they take that authority seriously. Little boys, run to mommy or seek to blame someone else or be nefarious about, escaping the consequences. So,
yep. And the other facet to that is there's two things when you start making these leadership changes and you're getting pushback. Consistency has to be there, because if you're kind of going back and forth, you're just going to be in an endless cycle of pain. And then for me personally, I've seen kids do the same thing when the mom doesn't respect the dad, that the kids start testing the dad as well. And so he loses that leadership with the children, and it's unfortunate, but it's just something. So consistency is such a huge part. I just can't express that enough. And then unfortunately, a lot of dads don't have solid, good men, tender warriors, as we've discussed previously in other episodes, that they can give sound, godly, good leadership advice. And so they go to these dad groups, and these dad groups are like, oh, your wife's cheating, dump her, or, oh, your wife's not worth it, just get rid of her and find somebody else, that'll make you happy. It's like, no, you're ditching one hard situation for an even harder situation. And it's like the advice, the worldly advice, is just so much worse, and they think it's that much better. And that's
It's
what just
terrible
blows my
advice.
mind.
Yeah.
Like I see guys constantly in these dad groups like, oh, you need to get rid of her and find somebody that'll treat you good. It's like, really?
It's like what my dad was talking about last week on our last episode was, happiness is an emotion. It's a temporal state of mind, whereas like joy is a decision, right? It's almost like a way of life. And like the whole follow your heart is like the biggest lie. That's one of the biggest lies that Satan has embedded into the modern world. You're supposed to lead your heart. You don't follow your heart, right? The heart can be tricked. It can be deceived. It's an emotional thing that can be led any way that you feel in the moment. Like you're.
Yeah, it's probably not your heart you're following. It might be a different organ that you're
right?
following.
Yeah, but I mean it's just ludicrous. And but like again, that's where we've talked about before is you have to go get a company of men, a group of men who have sound guidance based off of the word and based off of real life experience. And like, my wife and I, when we were living in Texas, and we had a really good small group led by a really old couple. I mean, they were in the late 70s. He had retired. And when I first joined the group, I was like, oh, I don't want to listen to this old guy. Like I don't want to be in this group. And it turned out that he was like hands down the best person to like call me on my crap, but in a very loving way. He's a very loving, gentle guy. It wasn't a suck it up, George. It wasn't like that. But I was ready to like quit on our marriage and all this kind of stuff. Just ridiculous. I was in my own ridiculous state of mind. I wasn't leading my heart or anything.
Mm-hmm.
And because I had him in my life to lay it out for me and bring me down off that precipice, we made it through. I mean, I have to attribute a lot of my marriage still being intact to Mike. I hope you're watching maybe, but
praise God for
Mike.
I
mean, yeah, it was his godly advice and life experience in his own life, being in his late 70s, being able to look at the situation holistically and talk me down, right? But
Right.
if I would have gone to a bunch of other guys at the bar or whatever, they would have been like, yeah, like Brandon said, oh, just leave her, she's not worth it or whatever. I mean, it's like, who do you go? I guess think about it practically. If you're looking for how to get better at like an instrument or something, you're gonna go find a good coach. You're not gonna just go to anyone on the street, right? You're gonna go find like a proven teacher to get better at whatever task it is. So why not do the same when it comes to your relationship? The most important relationship to your wife.
Yeah.
You guys go ahead, Brandon.
I was just going to say, so speaking of good examples of responsibility, John Michael, who would be a couple that you would give?
Well, that's the point I was going to make earlier when George was talking about, a man takes ownership, a man takes responsibility. My point was, obviously we do, because the pinnacle of masculinity is King Jesus himself. So how do we see him do that? Well, God so loved the world that he took ownership for the mess that we made. We did it. We deserved his wrath. We deserved his fury. But instead, Jesus says, I'll take it. I didn't do it. He wasn't guilty of anything. He was innocent, but he still absorbed it. He did the thing that our father Adam failed to do. The first Adam failed. Eve sinned. Adam followed his wife. Scripture literally says, because you listened to the voice of your wife and because you ate the fruit. It actually says that in your Bible. I didn't write it in there. Go read it. The Lord actually says that. But Adam failed. Adam could have given up his life for Eve right on the spot. God, Eve ate of the fruit. I know what has to happen.
Yeah, this
Kill
woman
me.
you
We
gave
would have
me.
been saved through Adam.
Yeah.
That's crazy. That's not blasphemy. That's not heresy, because we fell through Adam. We didn't fall through Eve, because Adam is the head. Through one man's sin, and it wasn't Eve. She's not held responsible for our sin. It's through Adam's. But Adam fails us, and then King Jesus, the one who's not guilty, comes through and takes ownership. That's why it's such a manly thing, because we are acting like King Jesus and we're following him.
Amen.
And then tying back to one of the points I was saying to Dustin earlier, step one in leading your wife is stop following your wife. Because a lot of guys are like, I want her to, and then I got ranting on matriarchy for a second there and how functionally that's how marriages operate. But an example of stop following your wife, like with those clients, sometimes, Dustin, we don't necessarily get into, here's how to go lead her this week.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times we understand that we're on the journey of getting there. But for a lot of these guys, we have to stop following. And that looks like simple little things. Stop following her instruction. You can dress your own children, brothers. You can put clothes on your kids. You're a grown man. They're your children and you can dress them. Those aren't the right pants. Baby, they look good. They're all right. And everything's going to be okay. For some guys, that's a starting point. That's a starting point to step up.
Yeah.
Is that mama's jurisdiction? They're my children. So when mama dresses them, mama can dress them. When I dress them, I'll dress them. Now, again, having the wisdom of brotherhood or a coach, in my case, to navigate with you, hang on, how far is she willing to go? How much is she going to double down? We can understand. But we don't do any of our things that we're doing out of cowardice. None of it. 0.0% is because we're scared. It's all because we're using wisdom. And that is a significant difference. And we don't want to call our fear wisdom.
Good point.
Oh, I'm using wisdom here. Are you? Or are you scared? I'm scared. All right, then I suggest go both balls in because you're scared. I'm not scared. I'm using wisdom. Praise God. Then we can walk delicately and wisely to navigate this situation for the good of everybody. Because like Ernest Shackleton, we're after the ultimate fulfillment of the mission. And this moment is the most important thing. I'm playing the long game and I'm going to win. And when I say I'm going to win, that means she's going to win. That means these kids are going to win. That means
awesome.
God is going to get glory. That looks like I'm parking the car. And she goes, oh, park over here. And I just drive on past the spot. I don't say, I'm a big boy. Don't tell me what to do. I got this. I'm trying to lead. None of that. None of that.
Right.
Like, I'll be the last.
That's what I do. Nice.
I'll be the I have a full breakdown at Costco. I roll down the window. I recruit old ladies to help me. No.
Dustin is so attacked in this episode. It's great. I love it. Dustin, it's time to put those big boy pants on, baby.
Hang on, let me get my big boy pants on.
I
So
just love it too
I
because
want to
Dustin is so
maintain my
big.
frame as the lighthouse. And I drive past that parking spot with my happy-go-lucky self.
Yep.
And she goes, why are you parking here? And I go, because I wanted to. You're being a jerk. You're being cocky. Here it comes. Here comes that test right away. You're being... I love you, baby. You ready to go inside? I can't believe this. Are you finished? You're being so robotic. She's going to hit you with anything and everything to try and get you to break. I don't like you being this lighthouse. Because why? Because you're being more mature than me. It's obvious to both of us. I need you to cave and fall down into the waters with me so we can be equal again. No, ma'am. That won't be happening. Now, obviously, she didn't say all those things. But it's and it's not smug. And it's not, ha-ha, nanny, boo-boo, look at me being mature. That's not it at all. It's genuine love. It's genuine leadership. It's genuine strength. And she's going, on one hand, she's going, what the heck? Ugh. And on the other hand, something inside's her going,
Yep.
that's a man.
Yep.
And she's going to continue to experience day after day, week after week, month after month of, that's a man. Yeah, it is. You're sleeping on the couch tonight. I'm sleeping in my bed with my wife, who I love. Are you all right, baby? Do you need a cough drop? Can I get you a glass of water? Like, is everything okay? I'm not backing up. I'm not a little boy in the hot seat. I love you, and I'm going to love you like a husband. And I'm going to be a man who has his own self-respecting boundaries, just like King Jesus. He laid his own life down. Nobody took it from him. Well, I'm just going to lay down my life. No, people are extracting it from you and demanding it from you. That's different. They tried to throw Jesus off of a cliff. He didn't let them. They tried to stone him. He didn't let them. They tried to arrest him at a portion of time. He didn't let them. He gave his life as the gift for his mission and for his purpose because it was what was best and it was the right time. But I have hidden in cowardice and gone, well, I'm laying down my life. No, Melvin. No, John Michael. You're afraid to tell people no, and you're pretending you're righteous and virtuous for it. You need to stop, brother. I love you. You can grow out of this, but we need to call it what it is. So that's what it looks like and for a lot of those guys, Dustin, to just step one a lot of times is stop following mama. It's not even about leading her yet. We'll get there. We're going to keep growing. But step one is stop following. And then we truly get to a 50-50. Truly, let's approach 50-50 for the first time in our marriage. And then from this place, she's going to start to feel the comfort of, wow, I have a covering. And then the last thing was something that Brandon had said. He was referencing the Facebook group. So I'm not in a lot of secular Facebook groups. I don't know if I'm in hardly any, but I'm in a lot of Christian men's Facebook groups. So Brandon, it's funny. I see the another picture where you're seeing guys who are like leave her. You know, she's trash. She's for the streets. There's a time and a place. for She's for the Streets, by the way. But I see the other side of the spectrum in like Christian men's groups where it's just like, oh, I want to gouge out my eyeballs because I haven't actually seen this post, but here's the joke that I make. Like, I fully expect in some of these groups someday for the guy to be like, hey guys, I've got a difficult situation. I don't know how to handle this. You know, my wife has been hanging out with the neighbor a lot, and I know he's a great guy, but you know, they want to have a movie night at his place Friday, and I'm not sure how I feel about this. And they asked me to make them dinner, and you know, I want to make them something nice and show them the love of Christ. But does anyone have any recipe ideas? Like, you know, I'm exaggerating here, but
make sure it involves sausage. That's it.
Man, I'm just like sometimes that's what I see. So a lot of my ranting, a lot of my frustration comes from brothers who need to be told, "Hey, man, I've had to break bad news to a lot of guys I've worked with in the past, and they're like, "Hey, this is going on, and this is going on, and this is going on," and I'm going, "Ooh, this sucks."
Yeah.
Hey, Jeff, I know you don't know me, and you're not going to believe this, and I hate to tell you this. Your wife is 1,000% having an affair. No. Jeff, listen to me. And I'll take my time with him. He still won't believe me. It's okay. And I can help him and we can move forward. And that way Jeff can be the man he's called to be no matter what. Because he's not living for a woman. He's living for King Jesus. So we've got a lot of work to do. But again, the work starts right here. Get the log out of your own eye, John Michael. And then you can help your brothers and we can move forward. And that's how we're going to do it, guys. It is my goal. I mean, I want to be a part of changing the world. I used to be naive enough to think like, you know, and like we talked about as young men, the way you think, your ego's involved. Now I'm going one man at a time. That's how it's done. The Lord started this thing with a family. He's ending it with a family. I see no reason why family shouldn't be dead in the middle. And that's what we're going to restore. We're going to restore men. Therefore, we're restoring households. Therefore, the world is going to be disciple for King Jesus.
That's awesome.
Love it. Cool.
Yeah, and that's a very similar reason why we wanted to start this podcast, is to ultimately accomplish the same thing, even if it's just one person.
Yeah, absolutely.
One guy out there who benefits from it, then mission accomplished, right? It's one little thing we can do. But on leadership too, especially if you're in a bad situation and you're having to kind of retake your leadership and start working on the path that John Michael was just talking about, is just a thought to consider. Is you can't take someone where you're not already going. So you can't lead someone to a place you're not leading yourself to. So in that sense, you know, like John Michael was saying, it's not like you're going to magically go to one counseling session or whatever, read one book, and then come home and be like, all right, honey, here's how it's going to be. Boom, 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 boom. And like, you know, in his case, he called it emotional capital or something like that. Leadership
capital.
Yeah, I mean, you've
got
$1
million in debt, and I'm coming in trying to make a purchase. And no, not only can you not make that purchase, now there's a $30 penalty,
right,
for even thinking that you were that guy.
Yep. So you've got to kind of do a 90-degree turn, dog leg away from the situation, and start going in the right direction. And eventually your wife will want to join you. In some cases, though, you know, if you're really on the brink of like divorce and whatnot, sometimes they reject the improvement, and that's a hard reality, is because they don't want to get better.
Yes.
And that was something just in my own marriage too. Like, you know, there were points, my wife and I were kind of like up and down, right? She was the adult, I was the adult, back and forth for several years, really rough couple years. But like when I finally put my foot down, I was like, no, this isn't, you know, it's not the he said, she said thing anymore. I'm just going to take responsibility and do the right thing that I know is what I need to be doing, regardless of how she acts, type of thing, right? About 28 years old. And my people giving me counsel from many different places warned me that, hey, look, she may reject this. You know, she may completely walk away from you, and that's the risk that you have to take. But ultimately, you know that this is the right thing for you. And that was I mean, that's scary, right? To consider. But you know, I'm glad I didn't let fear rule the day. And I just kept doing the right things. And just to be clear too, I don't want to like say my wife is some horrible person or whatever, right? That's not the situation at all. But you know, relationships are messy, they're tough, especially when you're in the middle of it, right? It's that penny that's right in front of your eye, and so that's all you see. And so the world starts getting really distorted. And when two people are in that situation, it's very easy to make bad decisions. So
Of course.
Or give up on something because of a temporary situation, right? So anyway, just be aware that that is a possible outcome. And ultimately, doing like what John Michaels talked about, of doing the right thing and leading yourself towards ultimately where we should be is going to work out better for you in the long run, regardless of the temporal situation today. So.
Yeah. I've had a few of those, George, where that same situation played out, where, a guy's in a crisis scenario, and he starts changing, he starts leveling up, and the promise that I can make him is not what his wife's going to do. I don't know what she's going to do. She gets to cast her own vote, just like Adam did in the garden. He got to cast his own vote. God is perfect leadership, and we rebelled against it. So I don't know what she's going to do. But in those situations, my promise to him is, brother, you're going to live happily ever after with, Mrs. Clark. But I can't guarantee what her first name's going to be. She gets to decide that. But let's make sure that if she blows this thing up, or if you need to walk away from this thing, let's make sure that you are rooted and grounded in Christ. Let's make sure that this never happens again. Let's make sure that let's make sure that everybody who looks into this situation goes, she's lost her mind. And not because they don't know the whole story, but because they know who this man has become. So we really focus in those kind of situations on really helping the brother be strengthened in himself, like the family culture side of things, and protecting his children. That's the other priority in those moments, depending on what the details are. But yeah, that's a hard situation, man.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you kind of walking through a lot of what you deal with in your work as a family captain, and I just love it. One, I love the name. It's such a good program name. I mean, you probably couldn't have picked a better tagline. But I just really appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to come here and have this discussion with us today. I mean, I was really looking forward to it because the whole topic of leadership is something near and dear to my heart. But I love the injection of God's word into it, but also on a practical level that you've given us on just little things, whether it's the rites of passage with your sons, or little things that you can do to demonstrate leadership. It was just really, really a great time tonight. So I appreciate you coming on.
Of course. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to hang out with the bros.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to take a minute or two and let you just kind of replug what it is you do. And you said you have a podcast. We can kind of talk about that too and make sure that people are aware of it, because I think you've got probably a lot of really good content that people can benefit from.
Yeah. So if you guys love the Shackleton book, like Brandon said, I did 2 podcasts on the endurance book, and I loved it so much. I had my son on that one with me, right, Brandon? Yeah.
You did.
I don't know how old he was at the time. He might have been 12, maybe 13, but he loves the book too. So we had fun with that. But yeah, the work that I'm doing through the Family Captain, you can find the podcast, Family Captain Podcast, wherever you like your podcasts. And then the other big place where we're having the party is in the Facebook group. So I have over 30 hours of video trainings, free video trainings there in the Facebook group to help guys level up, to bless them, where, I'm always bringing something new, something relevant, and keeping those conversations going. And on top of that, I do have, of course, what you've already heard about, the Family Captain Elite 12-week coaching program. And we've got something underneath that. If guys don't want to make that kind of commitment, if they're not in a place where they're ready for that level of growth or that fast track or that financial investment, we also have a monthly subscription that we made accessible to everybody's budget. So the guys can still get more access. They can still get the brotherhood, and they can truly get like more of those examples. The how, what the heck does it actually look like on a Wednesday afternoon though? Instead of, man, love her like Christ loves the church. Like, okay, that's good. That's biblical. But what the heck? Oh man, just be a servant leader. All right. But what do I do? So we really make things practical so that guys can start to flesh it out, and then have the consistency that they need, have the competency coming in, so that it's not just our brother-in-law, telling us what he thought worked one time, and really guys able to get mastery. So yeah, the elite program though, that's where I love to work with guys, because that's where I get to be personal with them, learn their scenario, and give them the custom solutions that they need, and get the ridiculous results where households are transformed. And it's awesome. It's a lot of fun.
And just to maybe help plug a little bit too, it looks like your latest episode is called "Becoming the Man Your Wife Wants to Have Sex With." So, on your podcast. So,
Oh, right, yeah.
Yep.
I'm getting ready to drop. So all of the live trainings in the Facebook group are getting ready to drop into the podcast. I'm
Awesome.
having somebody turn all those into audio. So there's about to be a whole bunch more on the podcast dripping regularly out. So yeah, a lot of good stuff there.
Fantastic.
And just for everybody, if you can plug, we'll put it in the description, but you can also put a banner. It's facebook.com/thefamilycaptain. Okay. And it's a great group. I've been in there, and I've watched all these videos and just seen how much God has done through John Michael and how much he's grown. And look, man, brother, I'm proud of you, man. Keep on keeping on with that. So
thank you, Brandon. I appreciate you, brother.
Yeah, man. Pray for you often, for sure. Closing thoughts, guys. Anything else we want to say before we cut it?
I'm excited to try some new stuff. Yeah, I'm going to put some levels together. I'm going to look at what steps are going to be. I'm going to have some challenges set up for my son. I'm getting pumped thinking about the different stuff I'm going to do with him. This is going to be a really fun bonding experience.
I love it, dude. Action, baby. Imperfect action. That's why I tell the guys all the time. Like, we're not just needing to learn more theory. Go freaking do something. So I love hearing that, Dustin.
Yeah, absolutely. Guys, hold me accountable to that. In a month or so, be like, hey, what happened with all that stuff you said you were going to do? Did you actually do it, or you just say it? So yeah, let me.
Dustin,
follow up with me.
Your little guy's 2. Is that what I remember?
He's 2. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Dustin's going to be like at 2.5. I expect he's going to have.
He'll be dunking a basketball, and
by the time you're 3.
To be fair, he might actually be dunking a basketball by the time he's 3. He's really big, so we'll see.
I saw him in your lap earlier when we were backstage. He is huge for a 2-year-old. Holy smokes! Yeah. You must get really tired doing the whole pick up your toddler thing because.
Gosh, so
he's a big
mom
boy.
And my wife's mom have both injured their back picking him up this year because he's so big.
Jeez.
They weren't ready for it. He's 40 pounds of just brute muscle. So
nice.
Yeah,
dang, he almost weighs as much as my daughter, man.
He's a big kid, yeah.
My daughter's 7.
Yeah.
Holy shnikes.
Yeah. So, a lot of
pro athlete in the making right there.
Exactly.
He's going to get real trophies.
Yeah, he'll have
he's gonna actually earn it.
Yeah. Most definitely.
Yeah.
Well, I could say for dads that are struggling, I want to encourage you guys, keep checking us out. We'll keep trying to grow together. We'll give you guys as much resources as we can. Invest in yourself. And if you need it, go to the Family Captain. I can't tell you how many testimonials I've seen on that group that the guys their lives have just done a complete 180, better sex lives, which is alone worth the investment. And then, all the things that they're doing as far as leaders of their household, like when you actually lead your household and your children respect you, your wife respects you, and there's harmony in your house, like that is the pinnacle of life, man. That's the pure joy that you get to experience, but you don't experience it without the hard work and the investment. So you got to invest in it. So I definitely recommend join the group, get into one of the programs. If you can't afford the bigger one, like he said, he's got a monthly subscription, go for that. It's amazing. I've seen a lot of the information there and it's all flawless. It's wonderful. So thank you again, John Michael. George, did you have anything else before we?
Yeah, just a couple closing things. One point I forgot to mention at the beginning, Justin unfortunately was not able to join tonight because he's currently traveling with his family to visit Brandon for Thanksgiving. So had to chalk that one up to travel yet again. So Justin was here in spirit. He actually left a really good comment earlier on that we highlighted, but he's sorry he couldn't be here, but he'll be there for the next one. And John Michael, again, just thank you so much. I really loved, I think, right away how you demonstrated the confidence and the clear vision for what it is you do, and you immediately went off on topics that I think most men today are scared to talk about right from the beginning of the episode. And to me, that speaks authenticity in what you do and that your message is pure. So that really struck me right away. Not necessarily any of the specific points you talked about, but that you didn't shy away from a potential tough conversation because ultimately it's right. And that's what men need to hear. So again, you're putting leadership in action right there. And just really appreciate everything you talked about. I will definitely be listening to a lot of your podcast. Really excited to dive into those myself. And that's pretty much it. We don't really have a planned next topic. We'll discuss as a team here and put that out. We know the holidays are coming up. December's pretty crazy month usually for everyone. So we may take a hiatus as the Present Fathers podcast, but stay tuned. We will post something to the channels when we have a confirmed date and next topic of discussion. And with that, I think John Michael has one final thought, and we'll wrap it up from there.
Yeah, I just want to encourage all you guys out there. A lot of times we've been sold the idea that we have multiple missions in life. You got this, you got to check in at work, you got to check in with the church, you got to check in here and there and everywhere. I got to check in as a husband, I got to clock in as a father. And I just want to point you to the bigness of the high calling of family leadership. This is the freaking thing, dude. And when you get into it, it's dope. I know some of you are listening tonight and you're just hearing exhaustion. As you're listening, you're like, oh, now I gotta. Brother, when you flip this switch to see the big picture, that this is your garden, bro, we may be a cog in a wheel in this factory. We may be a cog in a wheel in this corporation. We may be a cog in a wheel in a lot of places. This is a place where you get to be a king, not in the egotistical sense or a tyrannical sense, but this is the place where you get to rule for the glory of God. And it is freaking incredible when you give yourself over to it. The garden that you tend, you get to eat all the good fruit that comes out of it. I touched on that earlier, but I want to just remind you, there's so much goodness here. It's not another silo that you have to show up for. This is the base for all of operations that come out of your life. You are the CEO of all of this, and it touches on all these other things as the Lord expands your influence. So be faithful in household, be faithful in husbanding, be faithful in fatherhood, be faithful as a man, and the Lord will expand your influence into all these other lesser and secondary things.
That's perfect way to finish it. I love that. That's a great way of framing it. So, John Michael, again, just thank you so much for taking the time with us tonight. This is a really good episode. I really love the content. And with that, we'll go ahead and wrap it up. So thanks, guys.
Thank y'all.
Thanks for watching this episode of the Present Fathers Podcast. Please be sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications so you can know when we go live next. Also be sure to check us out on Facebook, Twitter, and our Discord channel. It's our desire to grow this fathership together and support dads out there. If you think this channel would be beneficial to someone you know, please share it with them. We look forward to seeing you in the next episode.